Jack Shabrowski here. Let's talk about marketing warfare. This, of course, is the perspective of thinking about marketing a product in the same way that generals and leaders might think about fighting a war. And this, of course, is the fight for customers. To win the game, the football team must focus its efforts on outwitting, outflanking, and overpowering the opponent. The same is true in business. Of course, this is the case in football, war, marketing, golf, tennis, checkers, and all other forms of competition. Because of the importance of the competition faced by the firm, a good marketing plan and a good professional marketer should always spend some time learning about the competition and devising strategies to deal with them. This discussion today is going to be based partially on the very traditional book by Al Ries and Jack Trout on marketing warfare. The war of business. The two characteristics of war and business: strategy and tactics. And of course, one of the questions that we have to talk about when we think about the competition and we think about the importance of the competition in terms of our marketing is, should my marketing efforts be customer focused or competitor focused? And that does make a difference. And in some cases, the answer might be the customer, and in other cases, the answer might be the competition. A customer focus is where we simply stay focused on our customers and we typically just don't worry about what the competition is doing. Of course, that's a fairly dangerous approach, right? On the other hand, if we simply focus on the competition and don't think at all about the customers, sometimes we lose track of what the customers want and need and what the customers prefer. In the idea of war is business and the fight for customers, the concept in marketing warfare is that customers are a way of keeping score. That is, market share, sales, brand loyalty, repeat business. Those are all measures of how well we're doing in the battle with our competition. The study of marketing warfare is not simply a study of winning, it's also a study of not losing. And so when we talk about the competition, we talk about the idea that sometimes we need to be focused on winning, and other times we have to make sure that the competition doesn't take customers away from us. And of course, one of the basic notions in all of this is that he who attempts to defend everything defends nothing. And that is, the concept of marketing warfare is knowing where to use your resources in a way that best defends your particular market and also is perhaps the best way to attack a competitor's market. When I'm discussing competition with students or competition with someone that I'm consulting with, I always come back to this famous analogy of, to catch a fox that keeps stealing your chickens, you have to quit thinking like a chicken and start thinking like a fox. And to that end, I often use the comment that there is no better way to spend your time than learning about the competition. Because the more you know about the competition, the more you will be able to defend your market and attack their markets. And so spending time learning about the competition is a great use of your time. The nature of the battleground. Marketing battles are fought in a mean, ugly place, the mind of the consumer. And the competition is also fighting inside the mind of the consumer and inside of your mind. Marketing warfare is an intellectual endeavor that makes it a difficult discipline to learn. So when we talk about marketing warfare, we're not talking about getting out the guns and it's not as much physical as it is mental, especially in the minds of the consumer and in the minds of the competition. It is psychological warfare, and of course that makes it particularly relevant in today's world. One of the key elements of marketing warfare is reconnaissance. That is scouting and looking and finding out what the competition is doing. We refer to this in marketing, of course, as marketing research. The key is to first find out who occupies which positions or strategic strongholds. Some are occupied, some are not, some are split among different competitors. Then you need to learn about your competition. And when you do this, it's important to separate the facts from the hype. In some cases, your competition has been hyped so much that you're afraid of them, or that they are hyped so much that you don't think you can beat them. Well, that's typically not the case. And of course, your learning about the competition is partially to understand what the truth is about your competition and what part of the competition is simply hype. If you decide to attack, you need a strategy specific to that situation. And if your stronghold is attacked, you need a strategy specific to that situation. And so reconnaissance and marketing research are a cornerstone to being a winner in marketing warfare. In marketing warfare, we talk about 4 strategic squares. That is defensive warfare, offensive warfare, flanking strategies in warfare, and guerrilla warfare. So let's talk about each one of those. Let's start with the principles of defensive warfare. Principle number 1, only the market leader should ever consider playing defense. Everyone else should always be on the offensive to gather more customers and market share. Of course, everyone thinks that they're the leader in their own little market. But understand that the customer determines who the leader is. And you need to be careful because it's okay to fool the enemy into thinking that you're a big time leader, but never fool yourself. Principle number 2 of defensive warfare. The best defense is the courage to attack, including sometimes attacking yourself. That is, understanding what it is that that the competition is seeing when they investigate and study you. When I used to coach college football, not only would we scout the competition that we were going to play, we would have an outside company come in and scout us so that they would tell us, here's what the teams that are scouting you are seeing about you. Here's what your tendencies are. Here's what they will think you're going to do on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is important to have the courage to attack the competition rather than always just trying to defend your own ground. Attack yourself with better products, better marketing. Of course, understand that the defender owns the strongest position, and therefore it is always easier to defend your market position than it is to go out and try to take customers away from a competitor. A moving target is always harder to hit. That is if you keep changing things and you keep improving, going from good to better to best, it is much more difficult for a competitor to figure out the best way to attack you. And once again, think about attacking yourself the same way that you attack competition. But remember, the best defense is to be on the attack and not always simply trying to defend your market. If a company tries to attack your market, one of the defensive strategies might be to turn right around and try to attack them instead. Principle number 3, strong competitive moves should always be blocked. All strong competitive moves should always be blocked. And of course, part of this is the famous Walmart story. When Walmart was just a startup, small discount store chain in the Midwest, in Arkansas and Missouri and Iowa and Illinois, um, the big leader was a company called Kmart. And most of you probably are old enough to at least remember Kmart stores. At one point in time, 60% of Americans shopped at Kmart at least once a month. 60%. They were the market leader. Kmart saw Walmart coming, and they could have blocked them. That is, they could have bought them out. They could have gone on an aggressive predatory attack and stopped Walmart in their tracks. But Kmart decided not to do that. Kmart decided that Walmart could have that low end customer, and Kmart had the intention of moving up to being more of a store that resembles the Target of today. Well, of course, once Walmart got to a particular size, they became a formidable competitor. And one day, the people at Kmart were sitting around in a meeting and they heard this big whoosh go by them outside. And it sounded like a tornado. And you know what it was? It was Walmart passing them in sales. And then, of course, you know the rest of the story. Walmart never looked back, and Kmart is gone. Remember, leaders have two chances to win. If you miss an opportunity, you still typically have time to block or copy the competitive moves. This is the way that, of course, McDonald's operates. If McDonald's watches the competition, and if the competition does something that is really, really successful, McDonald's then says to themselves, well, can we match that? Because if we can, maybe we should. The competitor to the leaders always have to knock out the champ to win the fight. So it's easier for you to not get knocked out and beat the competition. There's an old Detroit joke back in the late 50s and early 60s, and the joke was um, the Ford Motor Company was the leader of all of the big three in Detroit, and then Chevrolet came along with a new strategy, and the joke was Ford is selling safety and Chevrolet is selling cars. And of course, the joke was that Ford was emphasizing the idea of safety in the late 50s and early 60s. And it turns out that while safety is always important, it wasn't the determining factor for the customers. The customers didn't just want safe cars, they wanted cars that were stylish. They wanted cars that were fun to drive. They wanted cars that created a status symbol. They wanted lots of different things. And so you have to be careful. You can defend your territory, but don't let the competition get a stronghold with your customers. It is always safest to overcover any competitive move than to undercover it and let it get away from you. What do most companies do when a major brands are hit by a price attack? They wait and see. One of the principles of defensive warfare is that the worst possible defensive strategy is typically wait and see. That once you are attacked by someone, you need to do something. And the answer is almost never, oh, well, let's just wait and see. Because what you do is you give the competition then momentum and a head start, and that makes them harder to defend against. All right, now let's move to offensive warfare. In offensive warfare, the first notion should be the challenger's primary concern should be the strength of the leader's position, not the challenger's own strengths and weaknesses. So that if I'm going to attack someone, if I'm going to go after somebody else's market share, if I'm going to go after a product category that I'm not currently in, I need to really understand the competition's position, the leader's position, not my own position, strengths and weakness, because the leader, the company that I'm going after is going to determine what the best strategy is for me moving forward. The challenger should seek a weakness in the leader's strength, not simply a weakness in the leader's position, but a weakness in the leader's strength. That is, find something that the leader thinks is a real strength to them and see if you can't identify a weakness in that. An example of this is, of course, Burger King's attack on McDonald's. Now, and this happened back in the 70s and early 80s. Burger King was a distant second to McDonald's in the burger business, and they decided to attack McDonald's. And their strategy was very interesting. It was a factual attack, but it was an attack on the leader's strengths. They went after the McDonald's hamburger and they went after the McDonald's hamburger by saying and by providing evidence that Burger King's hamburgers were better than McDonald's hamburgers. And you know, and I know that, especially back in the early days, that 15-cent hamburger that McDonald's was selling back then, that was the cornerstone to their business. They're called a hamburger joint because they sell hamburgers. That's their business. And Burger King went right after that. Attack on as narrow a front as possible. Avoid any broad attacks. So Burger King didn't go after McDonald's, all of McDonald's. They went after the burgers. And what they did was they focused on the way the hamburgers were made. That is, cooked. So that's so they're going to attack McDonald's and they go after the hamburger. And then they go after a very specific part of that hamburger. That is, they go after the hamburger's cooking process. And what they said was, our surveys show that people prefer flame broiled hamburgers to fried hamburgers. And of course, McDonald's hamburgers are fried and ours are flame broiled. So you will like Burger King's hamburgers much better than McDonald's hamburgers. Now that seems like a kind of an odd approach, right? You know, you say, well, geez, I mean, we're gonna get in here, but notice how narrow that attack is, and note that the attack is in fact factual. It's based on facts. It's not based on taste tests or anything else. It's based on facts. Ours are flame broiled, theirs are fried. Well, of course, McDonald's didn't like that at all, and McDonald's immediately responded with a press release that said, "Our hamburgers are not fried; they are grilled in their own natural juices." Well, obviously, all that made customers think about is the fact that McDonald's hamburgers are fried in their own animal fat, right? And so that didn't really help. But that's an example um, of being able to focus on one narrow area. All right. If you're strong enough, play offensive warfare. The main consideration should be the strengths of the leader's position. Focus on the competition first, not yourself. Planning should be based on the competition's abilities and how you plan to attack their position in the mind of the consumer. Find a weakness in the leader's strength and attack it. Think inside out. Think inside out, and that is think of, when you're thinking about think about what the leader's strength is, and then maybe we should attack it. And I've got lots of examples, but the example, of course, that I used today was the example of Burger King and McDonald's. There are lots of other examples. I have the marketing textbook example here. I'm not going to go through that with you, but it's the idea. It's the idea that you need to find out what the leader's strength is and then attack it. Launch the attack on as narrow a front as possible. A single product, a single issue. The principle of force can be with you if you stay very, very focused on a narrow front. Remember, the odds always favor the defender. That is, in this case, the leader, the people that you're attacking. It odds favor them unless you can create a very narrow, focused attack. Then the odds even out. All right. So how about the principles of flanking? Well, of course, the idea in war, the idea of flanking is the idea of trying to outflank the competition. So an example of this in when I coached college football is um, using wideouts. The people when you're on offense, uh, sending people all the way out to the sides of the field instead of everybody bunched up in the middle. As soon as I move people to the sides of the field, what does the competition have to do? Well, what they have to do is they've got to go out and defend those people. And so what you do then is you open up the middle of the field by creating a flank on the outside of the field. In marketing, it's considered to be the most innovative way to fight a marketing war. Rather than taking the competition on heads on, flanking is a big gamble with high stakes. And of course, it's not for the weak of heart, but flanking requires an understanding of benefit segmentation and the idea of differentiating my product in a way that creates a potential new market and a new set of benefits that customers will be interested in. To do this, once again, it's a big gamble with high stakes, and it's not for the faint of heart, and it's also not for people who don't understand benefit segmentation. And of course, one of the other principles of flanking is the element of surprise is your ally. You don't want to tip your hand early. You want to surprise the competition. I have an example of this, and this is back in 1964. The Ford Motor Company um, had lost a bunch of market share to Chevrolet, a little bit to Chrysler and other companies back then. It was mostly the big three in America, but they'd lost a lot of market share to Chevrolet, and they had very, very quietly designed a new automobile that and it was designed by Lee Iacocca when he worked at Ford, um, to take on the Chevrolet competition. Chevrolets were considered to be fun to drive, and they were more exciting, and they were stylish, and on and on and on. So Lee Iacocca was charged with identifying and coming up with a Chevrolet killer. That is a product that would um, beat Chevrolet at their own game. And of course, Lee Iacocca's decision and team went in and did a bunch of research and thought through this and thought through this. And of course, they came up with the idea of the Ford Mustang, America's most successful individual brand in the automobile business ever. And it created a flank because Chevrolet had no cars that looked like the Ford Mustang. The Ford Mustang was inexpensive, and it was very stylish with a long hood and a short trunk, and it was $2,200, and it was quick and fun to drive, and it had and it was an instant hit. And Chevrolet had known a little bit about it, but they really didn't hadn't been worrying about it much because they didn't know very much about it. And Ford had done this in a very quiet way to try to make sure that Chevrolet didn't know anything about it. Done it in private testing grounds and all that sort of stuff. So when they launched it, and they launched it a half year earlier than they had originally said they were going to, and that also caught Chevrolet flat-footed. And Mustang was successful when it started, partially because of the element of surprise, and it was successful for all the years beyond that. A good flanking move must be made into an uncontested area. Okay, so this is the idea of coming up with a new product or a new marketing campaign or a new set of benefits that we're going to go after. Good flanking moves need to be made into uncontested areas. Newness and exclusiveness is key. The key, of course, to all of this is benefit segmentation. Understand what customers want and need. Flanking requires some foresight. You have to market a product or service where there is none right now. And of course, that is what? That is risky, and it is not for the faint of heart. You're going into a brand new market. Tactical surprise should be an important element of the flanking plan. We already went over this. The best moves are those that are unexpected or not anticipated. If you go back to our famous story about about D-Day in World War II and the reinvasion of Europe, it wasn't that the Germans didn't know that the Allies were going to invade Europe. And it wasn't like they didn't know about when it was going to happen. And it wasn't that they didn't know where all the troops were located. But one of the things that the Allies did was they attacked in areas that the Germans thought were not likely targets for invasion because of the terrain and because of what the Germans had in place in those areas. They were relatively sure that they wouldn't try to attack there. And so part of the successfulness elements of D-Day was the element of surprise. Not in terms of them attacking, but in terms of where they attacked. The pursuit is as important as the attack itself. Once you establish a foothold and once your product gets started, you can't take your foot off the accelerator. That's the time that you need to really go after the competition. And of course, Ford did that wonderfully with the Mustang. And to this day, the Mustang is still one of the most recognized automobiles on the road. And remember, the leader has two chances to react. The leader can block your initial move, or they can do what? They can see that you're successful and come back and attack you. And of course, Chevrolet did that with the Ford Mustang, and they attacked it with two particular automobiles, the Pontiac Firebird and the Chevrolet Camaro. But neither was anywhere near as successful as the Ford Mustang was. And remember, when you establish a flanking attack, reinforce success, but also understand that if it's not being successful and you've tried it for a while and it's not working, you know what you need to do, of course. Pull the plug on it rather than pouring more resources into a bad strategy. Some typical flanking strategies include low price strategy, like Motel 6 came along and revolutionized the motel business by coming up with cheap motel rooms, bare bones. How about gourmet popcorn, like Orville Redenbacher's gourmet popcorn? Gourmet popcorn? Yeah, it worked. How about small size? When I was a kid, it was Volkswagens. When you were a kid, it was smart cars. Volkswagens were very successful, smart cars weren't. Largest size, like the Big Bertha, or what? Or the Big Gulp, or the Big Mac. All right. So sometimes bigger is better and it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. It could be in distribution, direct marketing. Now, of course, it's online marketing in different ways to market your products online. And then it could be product form. The one we like to use is, of course, Aquafresh. But another example is light beer. And of course, I have light beer here, the actual Miller's light beer. They were the original light beer company, and they created an all new product category, diet beer. But you didn't call it diet beer, they called it light beer from Miller. And they used former athletes to market it so that you didn't think it was for for women or for people on a diet. It was simply a beer that even former athletes would like. Next are the principles of guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is not fought by business school types. Guerrilla warfare is all about sneak attacks, ambushes, surprise attacks, sort of like today when we talk about pop-up stores and pop-up events. Those would be in the good old days referred to as guerrilla warfare tactics. When you decide that you're going to be a guerrilla warfare company, you have to stay focused and you have to stay on the move, and you can never ever sit still. Flankers are close to the competition. Flankers are close to the competition to bleed off customers. Two guerrillas create a whole new category to satisfy a different need. And then if the competition comes in and takes it away from you, it's okay. You're off to the next. Guerrillas operate under the element of surprise and the element of being nimble. Find a segment small enough to defend. It could be geographic, it could be by industry, it could be by benefit, it could be by submarket. Sometimes when a leader discontinues a product, an opportunity comes forward. That is, in some cases, markets are in what we might refer to as the maturity, late maturity, or early decline stage. And some companies will abandon those industries. Well, a smart guerrilla warfare operator might see how to revitalize that brand and make it successful again. One of the principles of guerrilla warfare is to reduce the size of the battlefield so that you're big enough to compete. And of course, this goes back to something like Rolls Royce. Why doesn't Bentley or Rolls Royce produce some sort of a $50,000 Rolls Royce or a $75,000 Bentley to compete for all of that customer, all those customers that are in that price point? Well, of course, the answer is what? They're not going to be able to compete with that in the long run. It probably will hurt their brand. And they're better off doing what? Selling $300,000 cars to a very small market where there is a true sense of exclusivity and a true sense of the value of the Rolls Royce automobile or the Bentley automobile. No matter how successful you become, never start to act like a leader. Always stay lean and mean. Always be a quick response organization. And the term we used to use when in sports is stick and move. That is, attack and then move on to something else. Don't stand still and let the competition line up and get a shot at you. Always be moving. Be prepared to retreat at a moment's notice. When the fight gets too big and too intense, just go ahead and move on to your next guerrilla tactic. Some typical guerrilla warfare strategies: geographic. For instance, you're not going to be in the tour business, you're going to be in the Las Vegas tours business, but that's still a great big business. So maybe your business is Las Vegas mob tours, or maybe it's Las Vegas ghost tours. Something narrow enough so that even though you don't have a lot of resources, you can become known as the expert in that particular area. Maybe it's a demographic warfare strategy where you go after the unwanted few. In the automobile industry, everyone wants to go after younger customers because, of course, they have more likelihood of becoming loyal customers and making repeat purchases over the years. However, the people who have the most money and the people who are most likely to buy automobiles are still older. And the older you get, the more you might be able to focus on designing an automobile that is, for instance, focused on the 65 and over market. Maybe you need to focus on a very particular industry, like the hard drive industry, or maybe you're in the printer business, and that's all. You're not in the computer business. You're not in any of the in the monitor business. You're not in the laptop or tablet business. You're in the printer business. And then in terms of products, it's something that is very, very specific, like Jeep. Jeep has always had a guerrilla warfare strategy, and that is Jeep has always been successful when they were narrow and focused. As soon as Jeep thinks that they want to produce a wide variety of vehicles, that's when they're not successful. Right now, if you take a look at the Jeep products that are not very well received, they tend to be not anywhere near the traditional Jeep product. The further away you get from the concept of the Jeep product, the more the less successful that company becomes. When they introduce their new pickup truck for Jeep, it is based on the Wrangler Jeep extended frame. It looks like a Jeep, and it drives like a Jeep, and it sounds like a Jeep. And of course, it's called the Gladiator, but it is what? It is a Jeep pickup truck. And then, of course, another strategy, of course, is the high end. We talked about Bentley and Rolls Royce, but other things like Steinway pianos, or in lots of areas, it's the high end niche that guerrilla warfare strategies often work. I have here now some warfare examples going back to 490 BC up through World War II, and there are others from more recent wars. But you'll see some of the things that these are examples of. The line of least expectation, attacking forces concentrated in an overpowering mass, the strength of defense, superiority of defense, and knowing when to fold them, principles of force. These are the things that these warfare examples show us. And if you get the Ries and Trout book, you'll notice that they have a little explanation for each of these. Principles of force. Key idea. In the idea of principles of force, God smiles on the side of the larger force. It's always better to have more resources than fewer resources. And the leader is usually the organization with the most resources. And the company with the most resources have the best chance of being successful. This, by the way, is true in NFL football, where some of the teams have more money and more resources than others. And of course, these large market teams have a better chance of being successful because they have more resources. They have the larger force. The rule of thumb is that attacking force should have a majority of at least 3-1 at the point of attack. Not overall, but at the point of attack. For me to attack someone else, I have to be willing to outspend them 3-1. I need to outwork them 3-1 at the point of attack. On the idea, 3 times as many ads, 3 times as many products, whatever it is. This can apply to people, promotional money, channels of distribution, etc. Here's the story about the mathematics of force. If I have 600 people and you have 900 people, and 1 out of every 3 shots fired inflicts harm, after the first round of firing, I have 300 people left. You have 700 people left. After 2 rounds, I've got 90 people left, and you have 600 people left. After 3 rounds, the game's over. So even though it looks like I've got enough people to compete with you, I don't. And it's also the idea for all resources. So what do I have to do? I've got to narrow the area of attack and put all my resources in that one specific area. If you have less force, you need to be more strategic. If you have fewer resources, you need to use them more effectively, more efficiently, and you need to concentrate them in a particular area. Another principle of force, Napoleon's quote, "The art of war with numerically inferior army consists of always having larger forces than the enemy at the point at which the attack is being made or defended." That is, being able to move your resources around so that you have them focused at the point of attack, focused where they are needed. The better people fallacy. The argument is, well, they're bigger than we are, but we have better people. Well, you better have a better strategy and not better people. The stronger competitor can always match your people. The better product fallacy. The bigger kids always take the smaller kids' toys away. This is, the example of this, of course, is in the soda business, where when I asked students, who was the first company to come out with diet soda? It was Royal Crown with Diet Right. Who's the first competitor to come out with flavored colas? The answer is Diet Right and Royal Crown. The question then is, who had the first non-caffeine sodas, colas? And the answer again is Royal Crown. How come Royal Crown didn't do well with this? It's because when these products started to be successful, the bigger kids, Pepsi and Coke, came into that market and flooded it with their products and took all the market share away. Remember the superiority of defense. The biggest mistake marketing managers make is not understanding the power of a strong defensive position. All strong competitive moves must be blocked. Period. All strong competitive moves must be blocked. And of course, the worst defense is wait and see. Wait and see is not a defense. There are top-down strategies and there are bottom-up strategies. And of course, that begs the question, do strategies lead to tactics or do tactics lead to strategies? And the answer is both. Top-down is a strategy, are strategies that are driven by strategic decisions and they drive the planning and the execution. Bottom-up planning is typically building a strategy around the tactics that we're the best at and we have available to us. Top down, more strategy focused. Bottom up, more tactically focused. In summary, marketing is the battle for your mind and the mind of your consumers.